Hi there, welcome to Gnostic Vlog Confessio 21. I have a few more videos to upload before I enter into my period of review. I did say I was going to do this last week, but the material keeps on coming. So much to think about, so much to study as far as Gnosticism is concerned. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that as far as the coronavirus pandemic is concerned, for myself, I'm actually rather enjoying being locked down. I'm actually cocooning with my partner because she is having to cocoon because she's over 70. So, and I'm having to cocoon with her because I can't drive anywhere because I can't, I haven't got the sight to drive or do much really. And as I say, I'm rather enjoying being isolated. I do my videos, I do my research, I go in the garden. I've got a lot of clipping to do, and the motor mower broke down, and I've got no way of fixing that, so I have to do it all by hand, clipping the grass by hand, and there's an acre of it to do, or most of an acre anyway, various portions. So I can't really do anything but cut grass for months ahead, which is a bit of a bummer. Anyway, apart from the gardening, which I find very soothing and calming and rhythmic, um, I don't see anybody. Obviously, I don't go out anywhere, and I don't have any friends. So physical friends on the physical. Not with. I can go within. I can concentrate on contemplation, as it were. But I was thinking, it's an interesting thing. This thing about. I think I've covered this before, but I think in my life, if this was the materialist side of life, I think if I had followed set guidelines and pathways throughout life, I could have been quite a materialistic person, actually. And I've had numerous opportunities, in fact, to become very materialistic, I think. Although, I haven't actually appreciated that. But really, I think I have ever since I was, graduated from college and could have taken a science degree instead of religious studies, which I did years later. And if I'd done that, I would have probably got a good job and, and a wife and two kids and a dog and a garage and, and been pretty happy with my life, actually. And like most people, but of course I would be now worried about my parents or parents-in-law, worried about my own job, I suppose, really, because I was going to be like 30% unemployment as a direct result of the coronavirus pandemic, 30% pretty much worldwide unemployment. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, that's for sure. So, first of all, it was 9/11, and then it was 2007 crash, the war on terror in between, and now this. Not a great start to the century. But then I was thinking, actually, no century has been that particularly good. In fact, I suppose this century has been a little bit better than the 20th century because that saw two world wars and the death of millions and millions of people through war and genocide. So, and then there's been 200 wars ever since around the world. As Russia and America have fought each other by proxy, and now, of course, the war on terror is just a general way of testing out weapons in the field, of course, which is the advantage of fighting countries that can't really fight back much. So on the side of materialism, yes, I could have been materialistic, but I've always suffered from a great deal of laziness. I'm a very lazy person, very passive person. I never have it get up and go. But you see, you don't have to be that active to follow the paths that other people follow in order to become materialistically successful. You see, I always thought it was a great sort of hardship, but in fact it isn't really. And people generally have a pretty good life just following everybody else, really, and following the set guidelines. Even if you're an entrepreneur, there are set ways of becoming an entrepreneur and kind of becoming a successful entrepreneur, and even sort of set guidelines on how to manage risk and how to cope when things go belly up. But I never followed any of these guidelines or these protocols, as you might say, or the way that things are done. I've always been a rebel and wanted to do everything my own way. Well, actually, what I wanted was to want something, and then it would just happen. So I wouldn't have to get it at all. I've always lived in Harry Potter world, really. But then some people might say, well, if you've lived in a make-believe world, why didn't you become a writer? And then you make believe and you make a world for other people and they buy your books and you become super rich. So I could have become materialistic as a writer and worked 8 hours a day on my typewriter. And that would have been fun, I suppose. But then I always wanted, I've been attracted to the spiritual side of things, I suppose. Possibly to the occult side of things as well, or the hidden side of things, the hidden life, the spiritual life. But there are many aspects of spirituality or magic where you actually have to work as hard as somebody who owns a multinational corporation. In fact, probably even harder on an individual basis because you can't, get anybody else to do the work for you. You have to do it all yourself. So you're a one-man or one-person band as far as spiritual progress is concerned. But then, I was too lazy to actually bother following a spiritual path either, really. Or also it seemed. But now, of course, so what happened was I sunk between the two stools of spirituality and materialism, and I became a frustrated loser with fits of rage and anger and avarice as well. I'll go down the street and I always want what other people have got, but can't be bothered to get it for myself, you see. That's the worst of all worlds, isn't it, really? You want things, but you can't be bothered to get them, so then you don't have them. So then you become rageful and frustrated all your life, and that's become a pattern, which has actually affected my immune system. The stress of those thought patterns, and of course the other. So I'm enjoying being isolated because I don't get sick all the time. I mean, I used to go to town. And come back and I get a virus from someone. My immune system's absolutely shot. Due in part, I think, to stress and depression and being a frustrated, avaristic loser person. But I also think it's probably a physical. I've probably got an immune deficiency disorder like lupus disease or something like that. So that'll have to be investigated. But mind and body are sort of very closely connected. So I can't help thinking that all my mental attitudes have now are now of course physical problems, which I didn't have before, especially as I'm getting older, you see. And I got less of an immune system that can take the mental punishment, as it were. But I've also discovered, as a result of being on my own and being isolated from people, I've discovered actually that you don't have to work hard to be spiritual. It's actually very simple. Instead of trying to grasp spirituality in the same way as you're trying to grasp material objects, you can actually what you actually have to do is let go. So the process of spirituality is of letting go. Not just letting go grasping in the Buddhist sense of the word, but letting go in terms of your consciousness. In fact, it's falling off a log. You've got to really, it's as easy as falling off a log, but it's actually as difficult because you have to let go in order to fall, you see. And when you fall, you go into soul awareness, and you also trust in the Holy Spirit to catch you, basically, when you do fall. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If the Holy Spirit doesn't catch you, and you're lying on the ground, rather bruised, and with your ego rather bruised, then you have to visualize the Holy Grail, which reminds you of the fact that in this world, spirit and matter are in contention with each other, but also in harmony with each other as well, in some peculiar sort of way. And whilst you're contemplating that, you don't feel so bruised. And then you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again, as the song says, you see. Maybe I found a fourth way, like a fourth estate, which is introspection and breath awareness, and that actually is about letting go rather than about grasping or grasping after. So I see a lot of people grasping after magical power on one hand, and people grasping after material success in the other, and it all ends in tears, as it must do, because when you're crying, the demiurge is feeding off the energy of your despair and your depression and your fear. So it wants you to fail because it gains from your failure, you see. And failure is inevitable in these lower worlds, inevitably and finally. So instead of grasping after, if you let go, then you go within or go without. So you go within, and you actually find a spiritual, a complete universe within. In fact, where actually all you do have to is want something, and it is. Well, you don't want it; it just is. So you don't even want it, because if something is, then you have it already. So you don't want it anymore. So you don't have to want. You don't have to get. You just have. You just have the haveness of the spiritual world. You see. And it's taken me 60 years to sort of realize this. And it's taken a pandemic to force me into reclusion, where I can contemplate these things and discover that, that there was no need to be a frustrated loser, and there was no need to go after materialistic success. And there was no need even to go after some sort of spiritual power that was supposedly sort of veiled from me. It isn't veiled at all. It's right there. It's been there all the time. And that sort of gives me briefly the final point, which is, I think, and I'll come back to this as I make my video on my holy sigil, holy symbol, the symbol of what I understand Gnosticism to be. And which is a bit, this is a sort of prototype of it, what I've drawn just now. And I think that actually soul chose to go down into the worlds of the demiurge. I think that humankind, is actually the fallen angel. I think we just decided we wanted to go down to the city. We wanted to, it's the parable of the prodigal son. Which has always been my favourite parable, actually, and really the parable that, to me, sums up the entire Holy Bible, New Testament and Old Testament, is that parable. It's the key to everything. It's the key to the mysteries. We just decided, as soul, to go and rough it, to go and slum it, and then we've got to go back to the Father and seek forgiveness, which we will get. But at the same time, we are also the brother of the prodigal son. So we are also accusing ourselves, because part of us never left the transcendental realm, and that part now stands in judgment over the part that decided to go down to the lower worlds and rough it, and squander all the money and get drunk and high and fornicates and end up feeding the pigs, end up with nothing. So we are both the prodigal son returning to the transcendental realms, and we are the brother of the prodigal son who stands in judgment over us. So we judge ourselves. And perhaps, I suppose, in some way, we are also the forgiving father, because we've actually got to then forgive ourselves as well. So we are these three characters in the parable, in the story. We are the forgiving father. We are the brother, the prodigal son, who's judgmental and resentful of the fact that he's been loyal to the father, and this idiot prodigal son has not been. And we're also, of course, the prodigal son, the fallen angel. We are Lucifer, if you like, that's fallen into either pursuing materialism at all costs or falling between spirituality and materialism to become frustrated, angry losers. And of course, the opposite of being an angry loser is an avaristic bully. And if you can't work for things, you take them from other people. You steal, you extort, you scam people for money. You literally steal money from people if you can't get it, or resources. You see, and you become a psychic vampire as a result of your inability to get things for yourself, you see. But you could argue that the whole of the human species is vampiric on the environment, which it certainly seems to be, and opportunistic and not too caring about the environment. So we have basically we have this problem, and we have this sort of desire for spiritual power, and treat it like it is a sort of physical, materialistic thing very often, and that leads to sorcery, of course, ultimately, and to just as much failure as the pursuit of material success. And so the world is either full of winners or losers, but basically we're all losers all of the time, and eventually when the physical worlds implode, we'll lose altogether. And of course, we have to die. We also have our mortality to think about. You can't take it with you. So I sort of been contemplating all these things over the lockdown period of this pandemic. And I've been wheeling all these thoughts around in my head. They sort of wheel around like a load of bats in my head. But as I said, I do have a couple more videos to make, I think. Although I have enjoyed making this one because I sort of feel a lot better. I was a bit depressed today. But then when I make my confession, as I do in my vlogs, I sort of feel a bit better. I kind of put myself in perspective, if you like. And the reason why I've made this vlog, putting myself in perspective, is because I hope that by sharing my experience and my problems, if you have similar experiences or similar problems, and you've similarly being avaristic and materialistic and grasping and with all the attendant suffering of that, then this might give you a bit of perspective on how you might get out of the problem. And which brings me on to my final point, which is that I will make a video sort of putting it all into perspective and giving you, the viewer, something to do. Because I agree with Stefan Heuler that people want something to do. It's all very well having theory, and you can sort of theorize all you like. But really, you've got to be practical, especially in this material world. You've got to do something. It may be a very simple something, but you've got to do it, and you've got to do it regularly. And it might be a very easy something that you have to do, but you still have to know what it is you're supposed to do, simple or otherwise. Because otherwise, all this is just theory. All this is just words, really. And words are so easily spoken, but people don't mean them. People go back on them, and people, have good intentions, but they don't act on them, so they just become frustrated losers again because they're full of intentions and words, but they don't actually do anything about anything. So I suppose, but what I'm saying is it's not hard. There's a simple something that you can do, and having done that and doing it regularly, you could see a change in your psychological makeup at the very least. And of course, who knows what spiritual changes will occur, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, by following a spiritual path, and by by creating a fourth estate, which is not materialism, it's not frustration, it's not some sort of magical power, it's just a simple spirituality arising, in fact, from adverse conditions such as we have today.